She froze when the cowboy unfolded a letter he should never have seen. The courthouse fell silent as Wyatt reached into his coat and pulled out a weathered piece of paper, its edges worn white from years of folding. Outside, a cold wind rattled the hitching posts, and somewhere down the street, a loose sign creaked against its chain. Nora's fingers tightened around the bundle of letters in her hands as she recognized the handwriting. The question wasn't why he had it. The question was how long he had been carrying it, and what else he had never told her. If stories like this speak to your heart, stay with us and join the journey. The first thing people noticed was the smell. Not Nora Bennett, not the pie dish wrapped in a clean white towel, not even the fact that she was walking toward the old Parker Ranch instead of toward town. It was the smell of fresh apple pie drifting through dry mesa on a cool September afternoon. The scent followed her down the dusty road like a memory. Men sitting outside Harper's General Store paused in their conversation. A woman sweeping her porch stopped long enough to watch. Even the blacksmith looked up from a horseshoe glowing red in his forge. Nora kept walking. The breeze tugged gently at the edge of her brown shawl. Dust gathered around the hem of her dark skirt. Ahead of her, the mountains stood blue and distant beneath a pale Colorado sky. She had lived outside Dry Mesa for almost 10 years, long enough to know people noticed things, especially when a widow changed her routine, especially when she carried a pie toward the ranch of a man nobody really knew. The old Parker place sat beyond a shallow creek and a stretch of dry grassland. For years, the ranch had stood empty. The corral had collapsed. The fences had sagged. The barn roof had lost boards one winter at a time. Then, 6 weeks ago, somebody bought it. A cowboy named Wyatt Mercer. Nobody seemed to know much about him, only that he paid cash, worked hard, and kept mostly to himself. Nora crossed the creek using the flat stones that locals had stepped across for years. The water was low this season, barely moving around the rocks. She adjusted her grip on the pie dish. For a moment she wondered if this had been a foolish idea. Maybe the man preferred being left alone. Maybe he would think she was interfering. Maybe... A sharp crack echoed across the property. She looked up. Not gunfire. Wood splitting. Near the corral, a man stood balancing on a fence rail with a hammer in one hand. Tall, broad shoulders, sun-faded work shirt. A battered hat pulled low against the afternoon light. He was replacing broken boards one at a time. The sound of hammer against nail carried across the yard. Steady, patient, like someone repairing more than a fence. Nora stopped at the gate. The cowboy looked up. For a second, neither moved. Something strange passed through her. Not recognition exactly. More like the feeling of hearing a song you had forgotten years ago. He climbed down from the fence rail. "Afternoon," he called. His voice was calm, warm without trying to be. Nora offered a polite smile. "Afternoon." He walked closer, wiping his hands on a work rag. Up close she noticed details. Dust on his boots, a small scar near his jaw, lines around his eyes that came more from weather than age, the kind of face that looked better when it wasn't trying to impress anyone. "I brought you something," she said. He glanced at the covered dish. "That so? I figured a new neighbor ought to have at least one proper meal waiting nearby." His eyes softened slightly. "That's mighty kind." Nora held out the pie. For a brief moment their hands touched the edge of the dish. Just a second. Nothing more. Yet something about it felt oddly familiar. Wyatt looked down at the pie. Apple. Still warm. The smell drifted between them. A faint smile appeared. Some kindness arrives before a man knows he needs it. Nora froze. Not visibly. Not enough for anyone else to notice. But inside something stopped. Because she knew those words. Not exactly, but close. Very close. Months earlier, a cowboy writing from somewhere near Santa Fe had ended a letter with, "Sometimes kindness finds a man before he's ready for it." The memory returned so quickly, she almost lost track of the conversation. "You all right?" Wyatt asked. "Yes." She cleared her throat. "Just remembered something." He nodded. Neither explained further. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It simply settled between them, like two people listening for the same distant sound. Wyatt glanced toward the mountains. "Looks like early snow might come this year." Nora followed his gaze. "That's what my husband used to say whenever the aspens started turning." The words came out naturally. She rarely mentioned her husband anymore. Most people immediately looked uncomfortable when she did. Wyatt didn't. He simply nodded once, like grief was something he understood well enough not to interrupt. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said quietly. No pity, no awkwardness, just simple truth. Nora appreciated that more than she expected. They talked for several minutes, about weather, fence repairs, the creek running low, nothing important. Yet when she finally started back toward the road, it felt as though they had spoken much longer. Wyatt carried the pie to the porch. She reached the gate. Then his voice stopped her. "Mrs. Bennett?" She turned. "Yes?" He hesitated, only briefly, then said, "Thank you." Not for the pie. Not entirely. The words seemed larger than that somehow. Nora smiled. "You're welcome." The walk home felt different. The same road, the same mountains, the same fading sunlight across the grass. Yet something small had shifted. That evening she finished washing dishes, locked her front door, trimmed the wick of the oil lamp, then crossed the room to a wooden box tucked beneath her bed. The box contained nearly a year of letters, carefully folded, carefully saved. The handwriting had become as familiar to her as her own. She untied the ribbon and selected one from late spring. The paper had softened from being read too many times. Nora unfolded it. Her eyes moved slowly down the page, then stopped. Her breath caught. There it was. The sentence. The one she remembered hearing that afternoon. Not identical, close enough. Close enough to make her heart beat faster. She sat very still beside the lamp. Outside, wind moved softly through the cottonwood trees. The house creaked once, then settled. Nora read the line again, and again. The same phrase, the same kind voice, the same careful way of seeing the world. For the first time since meeting Wyatt Mercer, a question entered her mind and refused to leave. What if the stranger next door wasn't a stranger at all? And long after the lamp burned low, Nora remained awake, staring at the letter in her hands, listening to the night, wondering. That was how Nora spent more than one evening after meeting Wyatt Mercer. The letter remained open in her lap long after the oil lamp burned low. She traced the faded pencil marks with her eyes, comparing each remembered word to the voice she had heard across the fence line that afternoon. It could be a coincidence. The frontier was full of them. At least that was what she told herself. Yet the thought stayed. The following Sunday, Dry Mesa gathered at the little white church near the center of town. Wagons lined the road. Children chased each other between cottonwoods. Women carried covered dishes toward the fellowship hall, while men discussed cattle prices and weather forecasts for the coming winter. Nora arrived early as she always did. She took her usual seat beside Ruthie Bell. The older woman glanced at her and smiled. "You've been thinking hard lately." Nora adjusted her gloves. "Have I?" "You keep looking out windows." That earned the smallest laugh. The service passed quietly. A hymn, a prayer, the familiar creak of wooden pews. When everyone stepped outside afterward, Nora found herself standing beside the water pump near the churchyard. She was speaking with Ruthie when she noticed Wyatt across the road. He stood near a wagon loaded with feed sacks. His hat was pushed back slightly. Sunlight touched the edge of his face. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Nothing dramatic happened. No smiles. No wave. Yet neither looked away immediately. Then a ranch hand called his name, and the moment disappeared. Later that week, Nora stopped by Edith Collins's post office to collect thread she had ordered from Denver. The little building smelled of paper, lamp oil, and dust. Edith handed her a wrapped parcel. "You hear the new fellow bought 6 more horses?" Nora pretended interest in the receipt. "No. Must be planning to stay." The words settled quietly. Planning to stay. For reasons she couldn't explain, she was glad to hear it. When she stepped outside, she nearly collided with Wyatt. He immediately removed his hat. "Sorry, ma'am." His apology came so quickly it made her smile. "You didn't hit me." Still came close. His gaze drifted toward the parcel in her hands. "Sewing supplies?" "Thread." He nodded. "The blue kind?" Nora blinked. "How did you know?" "The same shade you mentioned in a letter." The answer almost left his mouth. She saw it happen. Saw him stop himself. Saw the realization flash briefly across his face. Instead, he said, "The same shade I saw hanging on your clothesline last week." A reasonable explanation. Maybe even the truth. Yet something about the hesitation lingered. Before she could think of a response, Edith called from inside the post office. Wyatt tipped his hat and moved on. Nora stood there for several seconds after he left, watching dust swirl behind his boots, watching questions multiply. A few days later, a storm rolled down from the mountains. Not a terrible storm, just enough wind to remind everyone winter wasn't far away. By morning, one of Nora's windmill blades had broken. The pump stood still. The cattle trough sat nearly empty. She spent half the day trying to fix it herself. The ladder shifted. A wrench slipped. Nothing seemed to fit right. Then she heard hoofbeats. Wyatt dismounted before she could say a word. "Need a hand?" "I can manage." "I know." The answer came gently, not questioning her, not doubting her, simply offering. After a moment, Nora stepped aside. Together, they worked beneath a cold, gray sky. He climbed the tower. She handed him tools. The repair took less than an hour. Neither spoke much. Yet the silence felt easier than silence should. When the final bolt tightened, the wheel began turning again. Water flowed into the trough. Wyatt climbed down. A streak of grease marked his sleeve. Nora handed him a clean cloth. Their fingers brushed briefly. Again. That same strange familiarity. That same feeling of stepping into a conversation that had started months earlier. Because perhaps it had. As Wyatt prepared to leave, another rider approached along the road. Jeremiah Crow, the largest ranch owner in the valley. He slowed his horse near the gate. His sharp eyes moved from Wyatt to Nora, then back again. "I see you've found help." The remark sounded polite. It wasn't. Nora recognized that immediately. "So it appears," she said. Jeremiah smiled without warmth. "If you're still interested in selling that spring, my offer remains open." "I'm not selling." His jaw tightened slightly. "Land has a way of changing hands eventually." Then he tipped his hat and rode away. Dust followed behind him. Neither Nora nor Wyatt spoke until he disappeared. Finally, Wyatt looked toward the road. "He's persistent." "That's one word for it." Wyatt nodded. Nothing more. But she noticed the way his expression hardened, as though he had quietly taken note of something important. That evening, after Wyatt left, Nora carried a basket of fresh biscuits to the ranch house as thanks for his help. No one answered when she knocked. The front door stood partly open, not unusual on the frontier. She called his name. Silence, likely working somewhere behind the barn. She placed the basket on the kitchen table, then noticed a sheet of paper lying nearby, half finished. A note. The handwriting caught her attention first. Strong strokes, slight slant, careful spacing. Her breath slowed. She knew that handwriting. Not from today, not from town. From dozens of letters folded inside a wooden box beneath her bed. Nora stared at the unfinished page. The words weren't identical, but the rhythm was. The voice was. The man behind them was. Outside, wind moved softly through the cottonwoods. Inside, the little ranch house felt suddenly very still. For the first time, certainty settled where questions had once lived. Wyatt Mercer was the cowboy who had written to her for nearly a year, and somehow, standing there beside a half-finished note, that realization felt both wonderful and terrifying. Because now she had to decide what to do with the truth. Nora left the basket of biscuits on Wyatt's table and quietly walked back home. She never mentioned the note. Not that day, not the next. But once a person knows something, it becomes hard to unknow it. The following week moved with the steady rhythm of autumn. Mornings arrived cold. Frost appeared along fence rails before sunrise. The cottonwoods near the creek had begun turning gold. Nora continued her work. She baked pies, mended shirts, labeled jars of peach preserves for Harper's General Store, and all the while she carried a secret. The man who had written those letters was no longer a distant voice on paper. He lived less than a mile away. Sometimes she saw him from her porch, a small figure repairing fences against a backdrop of mountains. Sometimes she saw him in town, at the feed store, at the blacksmith's, outside Edith Collins' post office. Every meeting felt different now. Every conversation carried another meaning beneath the surface. Then trouble arrived. It came just after sunrise on a Thursday. 3 riders entered Dry Mesa from the southern road. Their horses were dusty. Their faces unfamiliar. People noticed immediately. Frontier towns always noticed strangers. The riders stopped first at Harper's store, then at the livery stable, then at the sheriff's office. By noon, rumors were already moving faster than the wind. Nora heard the first one while delivering 2 pies to the hotel kitchen. "They're looking for Wyatt Mercer." The cook lowered her voice. "Sheriff's asking questions." Nora's stomach tightened. That afternoon, she found Wyatt repairing a gate near the north pasture. The sound of his hammer echoed through the quiet air. He looked up when she approached. Something in his expression changed, as if he already knew why she had come. "You heard." It wasn't a question. "People are talking. They usually do. This feels different." Wyatt rested both hands on the fence rail. For a long moment he said nothing. The mountains stood silent behind him. Finally he nodded. "Yeah, it does." Nora studied him carefully. "Who are those men?" His jaw tightened. "Men from another part of my life." "What kind of life?" The hammer hung loosely from his fingers. He looked away toward the distant hills. The answer took longer than she expected. "When I was younger, I rode with some bad company." Nora remained still, waiting. "I was never proud of it." The wind stirred dry grass around their boots. "Are the rumors true?" "Some of them." The honesty surprised her. "What rumors aren't true?" Wyatt's gaze met hers. There was no anger there, only exhaustion. "I wasn't what people are saying." "Then tell me." Another silence. Longer this time. "I can't." The words landed harder than she expected. Not because he refused. Because she realized he truly meant it. He wasn't protecting himself. He was protecting something else. something she couldn't see. Nora folded her arms. That's not much of an answer. No. It isn't. The distance between them suddenly felt larger than the pasture around them. For weeks their connection had been growing quietly. Now something invisible stood between them. Neither seemed able to cross it. 2 days later, the town meeting filled every seat inside Dry Mesa's assembly hall. Farmers, ranchers, store owners, everyone had heard the rumors. Sheriff Owen Briggs stood near the front wall. Jeremiah Crow stood near the center aisle, looking entirely too pleased. The 3 strangers occupied the back row, watching, waiting. Nora sat beside Ruthie Bell. Wyatt remained near the rear door, apart from everyone else. The discussion began with water rights and winter supplies. Then Jeremiah stood. I'd like to address another matter. The room quieted. His eyes settled on Wyatt. We have a man living among us whose past remains conveniently unexplained. A murmur swept through the crowd. Sheriff Briggs frowned. Jeremiah. But the rancher continued. These gentlemen traveled a long way looking for answers. He gestured toward the strangers. They claim Wyatt Mercer rode with cattle thieves. More whispers. They claim he disappeared after a robbery. The room grew still. Nora looked toward Wyatt. He didn't move, didn't argue, didn't deny it. Jeremiah smiled thinly. If a man has nothing to hide, why stay silent? For the first time, Wyatt stepped forward. His boots echoed against the wooden floor. I rode with dangerous men once. Gasps spread through the crowd. Jeremiah's smile widened, but Wyatt continued. I left them behind. Convenient story, Jeremiah said. Maybe. Wyatt's voice remained calm. But it's the truth. The rancher folded his arms. Then perhaps you should leave Dry Mesa before trouble follows you here. The room seemed to hold its breath. Nora felt every eye moving between the 2 men. Waiting. Judging. Measuring. Wyatt's gaze found hers across the room. Only for a second. But in that second, she saw something she hadn't expected. Not fear, not guilt, resignation, as though he had spent years preparing for this exact moment. The meeting ended shortly afterward. People left in uneasy groups. Outside, darkness settled over the town. Lantern light glowed from storefront windows. Nora found Wyatt beside the hitching rail. Neither spoke immediately. Finally, she said, You should have told me. His expression softened. I know. Why didn't you? He looked toward the mountains hidden beyond the darkness, then back at her. Because if they come for me, I won't let them drag you into it. And before Nora could answer, Wyatt turned, mounted his horse, and rode into the cold Colorado night, leaving her standing beneath the lantern light with more questions than ever. And for the first time since finding the truth about the letters, Nora wasn't certain she knew the man who wrote them at all. The days that followed felt longer than they should have. Autumn settled deeper across Dry Mesa. Frost coated wagon wheels before sunrise. Thin ice formed along the edges of water troughs. Smoke drifted from chimneys each morning and hung low over the valley before the sun burned it away. Nora tried to focus on work. There were pies to bake, shirts to mend, a stack of receipts from Harper's General Store waiting to be balanced against what she was owed. But her attention kept drifting toward the neighboring ranch, toward Wyatt, toward the empty places where she expected to see him. When she finally rode past his property one afternoon, she noticed something that made her slow her horse. 2 stalls stood empty. A wagon loaded with supplies sat near the barn. Several horses were gone. Wyatt was selling stock, preparing, leaving. The realization hit harder than she expected. He wasn't fighting the rumors. He was preparing to disappear before they destroyed everything. Again. The next morning brought another problem. A black carriage rolled into her yard carrying a lawyer from Pueblo. The man wore a dark coat and carried a leather document case. Nora met him on her porch. He removed his hat politely. "Mrs. Bennett, I regret bringing unpleasant business." Nobody ever began good news that way. He handed her several folded papers. Debt records, old signatures, interest calculations. The debt belonged to her late husband, years old, mostly forgotten. But somehow it had resurfaced. At the bottom of the documents sat Jeremiah Crow's name. The debt had been purchased, transferred, claimed, and now Jeremiah intended to collect, including the spring that crossed her land, the spring he had wanted from the beginning. After the lawyer left, Nora sat alone at her kitchen table staring at the papers. The coffee in her cup turned cold. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. Inside, the house felt smaller than it ever had before. By evening, she visited Ruthie Bell. The older woman listened quietly while Nora explained everything. When she finished, Ruthie folded her hands. "Sometimes trouble comes all at once." "It certainly feels that way." Ruthie studied her. "You're worried about more than the land." Nora looked down. Neither woman needed to say Wyatt's name. 2 days later, another surprise arrived. Edith Collins appeared at Nora's door carrying a dusty wooden box. "I think I found something." The box had been discovered while cleaning a storage room behind the post office. Inside were old routing slips, mail records, forwarding requests, stacks of forgotten paperwork. For hours they sat at Nora's table sorting through yellowed pages. Then Edith suddenly stopped. "Wait." She pulled out a folded bundle tied with twine. Several official records, federal mail receipts, names, dates, signatures. Nora watched as Edith carefully unfolded them. The room grew very quiet. What they found changed everything. Years earlier, Wyatt Mercer had been communicating with federal marshals, not secretly hiding from them, helping them. Several letters referenced witness statements, travel schedules, protected routes. One document carried the signature of a deputy marshal. Another referenced testimony connected to a murdered ranch family. Nora's heartbeat quickened. The picture slowly came together. Wyatt had ridden with dangerous men once. That part was true. But he had left them, then helped bring them down. The men looking for him were not seeking justice. They were seeking revenge. Edith leaned back in her chair. "My lord." Nora couldn't speak. Every letter suddenly made sense. The caution, the loneliness, the constant moving from place to place, the fear hidden between ordinary sentences. The man who wrote those letters had never been running from guilt. He had been running from consequences for doing the right thing. Outside, darkness settled across dry mesa. The lamp flame flickered. Nora looked toward the window, toward the distant ranch beyond the hills, toward the man preparing to leave. She suddenly understood something that hurt more than any rumor. Wyatt hadn't hidden the truth because he didn't trust her. He had hidden it because he thought danger should end with him, not reach her, not reach anyone else. The next morning she rode to his ranch. The barn doors stood open. Several more horses were gone. A saddle rested on a packing crate. The place already looked half abandoned. One of Wyatt's workers met her near the corral. "You just missed him." Nora's stomach dropped. "Where did he go?" The man pointed west. "Said he had one last trip before sunrise tomorrow." Tomorrow. That was all the time she had left. That night, Nora opened the wooden box beneath her bed, the one holding every letter. She untied the ribbon slowly. One by one, she gathered them together. Nearly a year's worth of words, a year's worth of trust, a year's worth of knowing someone before ever seeing their face. Then she wrapped the bundle carefully in cloth. Outside, the moon climbed above the mountains. Inside, Nora buttoned her coat. She wasn't ready to lose her land. She wasn't ready to let Jeremiah Crow win. And she wasn't ready to watch Wyatt Mercer ride away, carrying burdens he no longer needed to carry alone. Before dawn, she saddled her horse. The valley lay silent beneath the stars. Cold air filled her lungs. The bundle of letters rested securely inside her saddlebag. Then Nora turned west and rode into the darkness, searching for the cowboy who believed leaving was the only way to protect her, and praying she wasn't already too late. The moon hung low over the valley. Frost silvered the grass beside the road. The only sounds were hoofbeats and the occasional cry of a distant coyote somewhere among the hills. Nora rode for hours. She stopped at a stage stop just after midnight. The clerk there remembered seeing Wyatt. "Passed through before sundown," the man said, headed toward the old canyon road. That was enough. She kept going. The cold bit through her coat. Her hands ached around the reins. But every mile carried her closer to an answer she could no longer leave unsaid. Just before dawn, she found him. Wyatt stood beside a small campfire near a rocky rise overlooking the valley. His horse was saddled. His wagon was packed. The first pale light of morning touched the horizon behind him. For a moment he simply stared, as if he couldn't quite believe she was there. Nora. She climbed down from her horse. Neither moved. Neither smiled. Too much stood between them. Finally, she held up the bundle wrapped in cloth. The letters. Wyatt's eyes settled on them immediately. "You shouldn't be here." "No." Her voice was tired from the ride. "But I am." The fire crackled softly. The sky brightened. Nora stepped closer. Edith found the records. His expression changed, only slightly, but enough. "You know." "I know." Silence settled between them, the kind that carries truth. "You helped the marshals." Wyatt looked toward the distant mountains. "I testified." "You left because those men wanted revenge." He nodded once. "I never robbed anyone." "I know." "I never hurt that family." "I know." The words seemed to loosen something inside him. For the first time since Dry Mesa had begun whispering, his shoulders lowered slightly. Wyatt stared into the fire. "I wanted to tell you." "Then why didn't you?" That question stayed in the air, long enough for the sun to climb another inch above the horizon. Finally, he answered, "Because you already lost enough." Nora frowned. "You don't get to decide that." "I know." His voice was quiet. "But I kept thinking if I stayed away from your life, trouble might stay away too." She looked at him for a long moment. At the man from the letters, the man from the ranch, the man who had been carrying his burdens alone for years. "You should have trusted me." "I should have." There was no excuse in his answer, only honesty. The wall between them cracked. Not all at once, but enough. Nora handed him the bundle. Wyatt took it carefully, like something fragile, something precious. The letters rested in his rough hands. A year's worth of words, a year's worth of friendship, a year's worth of hope. "I wasn't riding out here to forgive you," Nora said. That surprised him. A faint smile touched her face. "I came because I was tired of watching you run." For the first time, Wyatt laughed. A small laugh. Real. The kind she had imagined while reading his letters. By noon, they were riding back toward Dry Mesa together, and they arrived just in time. Because Jeremiah Crow had already begun moving against Nora's land. The courthouse hearing took place 3 days later. Every seat was filled. Ranchers, storekeepers, farm families. Everyone came. Jeremiah arrived confident. The lawyer arrived with documents. Sheriff Owen Briggs arrived carrying records of his own. Then Wyatt stood and presented evidence that changed everything. Payment ledgers, property transfers, debt calculations, records proving Jeremiah had manipulated the debt and inflated the claim far beyond what was legal. Sheriff Briggs confirmed it. The judge reviewed every page. The room grew quieter with each document. When the decision finally came, Jeremiah Crow lost. The debt claim was dismissed. The spring remained Nora's, and the valley learned who Wyatt Mercer truly was. Not a criminal, not a fugitive. A man who had paid dearly for choosing what was right. That Sunday, the church bell rang across Dry Mesa. People gathered as they always had. But something felt different. The whispers were gone. The suspicion was gone. After the service, townsfolk stood outside beneath a bright autumn sky. Nora was speaking with Ruthie Bell when Wyatt approached. He looked nervous. That alone caught her attention. Then he reached into his coat pocket. Slowly, carefully, he unfolded a worn piece of paper. The edges were soft from years of handling, the crease marks nearly white. Nora recognized it instantly. Her breath caught. It was the first letter she had ever sent. The very first one. The letter she had written late at night when loneliness felt heavier than sleep. Wyatt held it gently. I carried this everywhere. The crowd fell silent. Not because it was evidence. His eyes never left Nora. Because it felt like home. No one spoke. No one needed to. Months later, spring returned to the valley. Wildflowers appeared beside the creek. Snow disappeared from the distant peaks. Nora opened a small pie shop beside Edith Collins's post office. Wyatt rebuilt the neighboring ranch board by board. The spring still crossed her land. The letters rested in a wooden box above the fireplace. Safe. Kept. Remembered. One evening, after closing the pie shop, Nora sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Wyatt joined her carrying 2 cups of coffee, the familiar kind she liked. He handed one to her, then settled beside her. The valley stretched peacefully below. For a while, neither spoke. There was no need. Finally, Wyatt glanced toward the house. You planning to write another letter? Nora smiled, the same smile that had first appeared beside an apple pie months ago. Why would I write? She said softly, when you're finally close enough to hear me. The sun slipped behind the mountains. The evening breeze moved gently through the cottonwoods, and for the first time in a very long while, neither of them needed to look anywhere else to find home. Maybe that's what stays with me most about Nora and Wyatt. Not the rumors, not the fear, not even the long road that nearly pulled them apart. It's the simple image of 2 people sitting side by side after carrying so much alone. If you've ever stared out a window late at night, wondering whether anyone truly understood the things you never said out loud, then maybe you know a little of what Nora felt. And if you've ever carried old mistakes, old regrets, or an old fear that refused to loosen its grip, then perhaps you know something about Wyatt too. Life has a way of convincing us that some doors are closed forever, that trust is too risky, that healing belongs to other people. But sometimes healing arrives quietly. Sometimes it comes in the form of a letter, a conversation, a second chance, or someone who chooses to stay when leaving would have been easier. The lesson isn't that life suddenly becomes perfect. It's that the right person can remind us we don't have to carry every burden alone. I'd love to know what part of Nora and Wyatt's journey stayed with you the most, so share your thoughts in the comments. And if stories like this make your evenings a little warmer, I hope you'll join us again. There are still many heartfelt journeys, forgotten mysteries, and quiet acts of courage waiting just beyond the next trail. Until then, take care of yourself, and never underestimate the power of being someone's safe place to come home to.